Will Smith spent decades harboring a secret the world endlessly speculated about. His name was perpetually tied to hers, Jada Pinkett Smith. Like two threads woven into a narrative that never reached its final chapter, he remained silent. She never pushed. But now, approaching 60, in an unguarded moment no one anticipated, Will finally opens up, and what he reveals will shift everything. Oh, and before we dive deeper, tell us, what's your favorite Will Smith movie of all time? Drop it in the comments below. It was a night unlike any other. A bespoke studio setup, crafted to honor Will Smith's 60th birthday, radiated intention, not the grandiose, detached kind of tribute, but something intimate, human, and authentic. Giant screens displayed movie posters, behind-the-scenes clips, and snippets from long-ago interviews. A replica of the Men in Black neuralizer prop sat on a table, sparking chuckles from the crowd. Will stepped onto the stage to roaring applause. His signature megawatt grin softened by time, yet still magnetic. His hair, now flecked with silver, framed a face that carried both wisdom and mischief. Dressed in a sleek black suit because, of course, it's Will. He moved with the ease of someone who belonged but never took it for granted. The host, a seasoned blend of sharp-witted comedian and soulful interviewer, greeted him with a playful jab. 60 years old, and you're still out here looking like you just stepped off the Fresh Prince set. What's the secret, alien tech or a deal with the devil? Will laughed, rubbing his chin, his eyes crinkling with warmth. Man, I'm just powered by good vibes and Philly cheesesteaks. Keeps me young. The audience roared, the energy light and nostalgic. The conversation flowed effortlessly, diving into the 90s, blockbuster action flicks that bent the laws of physics, and how Will always looked like he was having the time of his life on screen. The host queued up clips, bloopers from Bad Boys, candid moments from Independence Day. One showed Jada Pinkett Smith laughing uncontrollably on the set of The Matrix Reloaded, where she played Niobe, nearly tripping over a prop in her amusement. The crowd laughed, pointed, and nudged each other, transported back to their younger selves. Then the host leaned in, his smile still warm but carrying a hint of reverence. We've got something special tonight. For you, for us, for everyone here. The studio lights dimmed. The iconic Bad Boys theme blared through the speakers and a montage rolled. Explosions, car chases, Jada commanding the screen. Will in full action hero mode, their chemistry electric. Undeniable, a force that needed no explanation. It simply was. The edits were sharp, cinematic, weaving high-octane scenes with fleeting glances, subtle smiles and moments heavy with unspoken weight. The audience cheered, then gradually quieted, not from disinterest, but from a deeper pull. They felt it. The camera panned to Will. At first, he was grinning, nodding at familiar scenes, reliving the rush. But then his expression shifted, subtle, a flicker of something raw. He leaned forward slightly, eyes fixed on a still image in the montage, a candid shot from the Bad Boys set.
Will and Jada between takes, laughing at something off camera.
He's gazing at her, her smile unguarded, oblivious to his stare. The host caught the change, quick but unmistakable, and let the silence stretch. Will blinked, his voice low.
That photo.
That was real, not part of the script. I remember that day. The room hushed. This wasn't Will Smith, the larger-than-life star. This was the man, unguarded, no lines to deliver, just memory. It was a long shoot, everyone was beat. But Jada, he paused, her name settling like a pebble in a still pond. She had this way of making it all feel lighter. Even the toughest days, the quiet ones. The host shifted, sensing the shift in the air. Not heavy, not light, but delicate, like a held breath. Will's eyes stayed on the screen. People always talked about our chemistry, he said, a half smile fading fast. But what they saw? He stopped, inhaled, then softer. I was falling in love with her. A gasp rippled through the audience, soft but audible. It wasn't theatrical, it was real. Will glanced at the host, then down, and I never said a word, a beat. Everyone thought it was just acting. But for me it wasn't, I was falling, and I kept it locked up. The host, usually quick with a quip, stayed still, his instincts as a showman overridden by the weight of the moment. He let Will continue. I told myself it wasn't the right time, Will said, his voice steady but laced with something older, heavier. Work came first. Or maybe I thought I wasn't enough, or...
He trailed off, nodding to himself.
Maybe I was just scared. The montage froze behind him, a shot of Will and Jada, Side by side, young, vibrant, timeless. The host leaned in, eyes wide. Did she ever know? Will shook his head almost imperceptibly. No, not once. The silence in the room wasn't tense, it was sacred. A cough, a rustle, the faint creak of a chair, but no one spoke. There's something I've never told anyone, Will continued, his voice low, deliberate. Not even her. The air thickened, not oppressive, but heavy with anticipation, the kind of silence that makes you lean in, afraid to miss a word. Will leaned back, hands resting loosely in his lap, no trace of performance. I fell for Jada during Bad Boys, he said, a faint smile blending nostalgia and ache. It wasn't some big dramatic thing. It was just us. We'd laugh at the same dumb stuff, sit in silence without it feeling weird. That's rare, you know? That kind of ease. He looked at the host, then down. She had this way of noticing people, not just me, everyone. A grip looking stressed? She'd crack a joke, lighten the mood. Never for show, just her. His voice slowed. When you've carried a lot of darkness, being around someone like that, it changes you. The host visibly moved, asked softly, did she ever show signs she felt the same? Will shook his head, a quiet laugh escaping, more rueful than joyful. Maybe, I don't know. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me with this softness, but I always second-guessed it. Told myself it was just her being kind, being Jada. He paused. Truth is, it wasn't about what she felt. It was about what I couldn't let myself feel. A beat, then he continued, his voice quieter. I was carrying a lot back then. Losses people didn't know about. My cousin, who was like a brother, passed young. Then other blows, personal stuff I buried deep. The audience stayed still, some covering their mouths, others bowing their heads. Will took a slow breath. When you lose people like that, your mind starts playing tricks. You think love's just another thing that'll slip away, something the world yanks from you. So I stayed quiet. Told myself I was protecting her, or maybe what we had. But really, I was scared I'd break her or break myself. The host's voice was barely above a whisper. So you let it go? Will looked at the floor, nodded once. Yeah, a pause. He looked up, his voice trembling, not with fragility, but with weight. I carried it for 25 years. The room felt suspended, the audience motionless. This wasn't about Will Smith, the icon. It was about a man who'd held something tender, something true inside for half a lifetime. The host, shaken, asked, why now? Will's smile was sad, tinged with the ache of time. Not regret exactly, but you start to feel the clock. Silence doesn't protect you forever, it just buries you. He paused, then added, and there's something I never told her. The host tilted his head. You mentioned a letter. Will nodded, his hands clasping together. After Bad Boys 2, we drifted. Not on purpose, life just happened. I was dealing with my own stuff, she had hers. But I never stopped thinking about her, about what could have been. One night, I don't know what sparked it, I sat down and wrote her a letter. He glanced at the audience, his first acknowledgement of them since the confession began. It wasn't a love letter, not really. It wasn't asking for anything. It was just the truth I hadn't said out loud. The host leaned in. Did you send it? Will hesitated, then softly, no. The word landed heavily, final. I kept it in a drawer for 15 years. A murmur passed through the crowd. I'd read it sometimes, he continued, when I needed to remember who I was or what I was running from. The host swallowed hard. Do you still have it? Will nodded slowly. Yeah, a pause. He turned toward the camera, not for effect, but as if speaking to someone who might be watching. Maybe it's time I read it out loud. The lights dimmed, the studio shifting into something quieter, almost hallowed. Will didn't produce a physical letter. He didn't need to. The words were etched in him, lived in him. He closed his eyes, his voice soft like a prayer. Jada, you probably don't remember the day I fell for you, but I do. It wasn't some big moment. You were just sitting there, probably eating a snack, cracking a joke about my bad aim in a scene. You laughed and it hit me, how rare that feeling was. Not just your laugh, but what it did to me. I didn't know how to say it then. Didn't think I deserved to. You were like sunlight and I was stuck in the shadows. So I stayed quiet, told myself it was enough to be around you, to make you smile, to play tough on screen even if I didn't know how to be that in real life. I've carried that silence and maybe I always will. But you should know, even if it changes nothing, that you were my safe place for a long time. He opened his eyes, his voice steady but heavy with something deeper. I never sent it because I thought I had time. The audience sat in reverent silence. Will glanced at the host. Something happened recently that made me realize time's not guaranteed. The silence that followed wasn't one to fill, it was one to honor. The host stayed quiet. The crowd stayed still. Will exhaled, his eyes drifting somewhere far off. People say I'm open, that I wear my heart on my sleeve, he said at last. And I do, mostly. But sometimes what looks like openness is just a shield. Sometimes silence is the only way you know how to protect what's left. He looked up, his voice steady but softer now. When you lose people early, your heart starts keeping score. My cousin gone too soon. Other losses, ones I didn't talk about. After that, love felt like a door I couldn't open. I got good at being alone, safe, predictable. I could care about people, show up for them, but letting someone all the way in? That was harder. A faint smile crossed his face, more recognition than joy. I thought I was protecting others from me, but I was protecting myself from the idea that I didn't deserve to be happy. The host's eyes glistened, but he didn't shy away from the moment. So when Jada came into your life, Will nodded, picking up the thread. It wasn't just attraction, it was like clarity. She made things make sense. I'd be in my head spinning, and then we'd be sitting in a trailer, sharing some bad set food, and everything would just slow down. He looked at the host. I thought I had to be whole to love someone like her. Thought she deserved better, someone brighter, cleaner. But now I see maybe she didn't need perfect. Maybe she just needed someone to show up. And I didn't. The audience remained quiet, many visibly moved. Will's gaze dropped to his hands. There was this one day on set. Big chase scene, everyone's on edge. One wrong move and someone could have gotten hurt. I was pacing, trying to stay focused. Jada walks up, hands me a piece of gum, says, "Chew this. It'll calm you down." Simple, right? He laughed softly. I remember that more than the stunt. The host, voice low, asked, "Did you ever come close to telling her?" Will nodded slowly. "Once, we were in her trailer, just us. No crew, no chaos, just some old-school hip-hop playing in the background. She was curled up, sipping coffee, and she looked at me and said, 'You're not as tough as you act.' I almost said it then. Almost told her everything. But I didn't." He looked down more to himself. I told myself later when it's safer, but later never came. The host, now visibly affected, asked gently, "What made you write that letter?" Will leaned back, sifting through memories. I was watching an old interview of hers. Not about me, just her being her, talking about life. What scared her, what she loved. She said something that stuck with me. He paused, searching for the words. "The people who make me feel safe are the ones I don't have to perform for." That was it. That's how I felt around her, safe, seen, no mask needed. He looked at the audience. So I wrote the letter. No filter, no show, just the truth. The host asked, "Do you remember more of it?" Will nodded, his voice deliberate, each word landing with care. "You probably never knew this, but being around you made me feel like I could breathe again. Like I wasn't just the guy on the poster or the shadow of who I used to be. You didn't ask me to be anything but me. I wish I'd told you what that meant." He stopped, swallowing hard. I didn't send it because I thought silence was safer than rejection. Or worse, regret. The host sat quietly, his expression raw. Will looked at the camera again. I used to think time would wait, that there'd be another movie, another moment. But time doesn't wait. Not for grief, not for fear, not for silence. Willsmith leaned forward slightly, his posture open, unguarded. I spent years thinking love had to be earned through healing, that I had to fix myself before I could offer anyone anything real. A pause, heavy with reflection. But maybe love is what helps you heal. The audience stirred, their emotions surfacing. Some wiped tears discreetly. Others sat in reverent stillness, hanging on his every word. The host, his voice soft, finally spoke. "What would you say to her now?" Will didn't hesitate. That I never stopped caring. That I always wondered what could have been if I'd just said it. He looked down, then back up, his eyes steady. And that I'm sorry, not for loving her, but for not having the courage to say it when it might have mattered. A quiet admission followed, almost a whisper. And maybe I'm still carrying that letter even now. The host leaned in, his voice gentle. "Do you ever think about sending it?" Will didn't smile, but his eyes softened. "No," he said, pausing. "But maybe I could let her hear it like this. Like now." The audience held their breath, and Will looked directly into the camera. "Jada, there's no agenda here. No ask, no unfinished business. Just a truth I kept too long. You were in a world that often felt too loud, my silence, the good kind." The room remained still. Even the host, tears brimming, didn't wipe them away. No one wanted to break the spell. Will sat back lighter, as if something heavy had been released. He inhaled deeply, his voice steadying. I kept that letter buried for 15 years. A long beat. And now maybe it's time I finally read it out loud. The studio lights dimmed further, casting a warm, intimate glow. It wasn't dramatic, it was sacred, a shared stillness born of anticipation. Will sat with his hands loosely clasped, his expression raw but not performative. He wasn't here to impress or evoke. He was letting something go. I don't have the letter with me, he said, voice calm. It's folded up in a drawer at home, edges worn, a little faded. But I've read it so many times I know it by heart. The host nodded, giving him space. Will turned slightly, not fully facing the audience, but as if speaking to someone beyond the cameras. He took a breath and began. Dear Jada, I don't know how to start this without sounding foolish or late or both, but maybe it's okay to be a little of each. This isn't a confession or a request. It's just something I should have said a long time ago and didn't. He paused, the silence holding his words like a fragile thread. You probably never knew the moment I started falling for you, but I remember it. We were on set midday. You were leaning against a prop, sipping a soda, chatting with a lighting tech about his kid's basketball game. You weren't trying to be anything, just you. Real, kind, effortless. And I thought, man, how does someone do that? I admired you quietly, constantly. And somewhere along the way, that admiration turned into something softer, deeper, something I didn't know how to name back then. His voice stayed steady, but an ache wove through it, not sadness, but reverence. You didn't know it, but you were the calm in the middle of my storm. There were days on that set when I was just going through the motions, smiling for the cameras, pushing through pain. But then you'd laugh, that big, unapologetic laugh, and something in me would wake up. I never told you, but you made me feel safe. And I hadn't felt that in a long, long time. The camera caught the audience, eyes wide, some glassy, others frozen. The host, his usual polish softened, didn't move. Will looked down briefly, then continued. The words flowing like a memory he'd lived 1,000 times. I told myself you'd never see me that way. That I was too broken, too heavy, too much of a question mark. I thought, she needs someone easy. Someone without all these shadows. So I gave you silence instead of honesty. Friendship instead of feeling. And I told myself it was enough. He swallowed hard, but his voice didn't waver. Here's the truth. Being around you felt like home. Not the home you're born into, but the one you find when everything else falls apart. I didn't want to own you or define anything. I just wanted to be near you, part of your orbit. That was enough for a while until it wasn't. A pause, then softer. You once told a reporter I was the guy who got away. What you didn't know is you were the one I never had the courage to reach for. If I could go back, I'd do it differently. Not to change what happened, but just to sit with you again in that trailer, music playing low, and say, hey, I think I feel something more. The emotion in the room had shifted, not sorrow, not regret, but something alive, peaceful, enduring. Will's voice lowered further. I never sent this letter because I thought I had time. Time to tell you. Time to show up, time to heal first. But time isn't generous. It gives you just enough to see if you're brave enough to use it. And I wasn't. The audience sat in absolute stillness. A woman in the front row wiped her cheeks. A man in the back leaned forward, as if hearing something he'd forgotten how to believe. Will's gaze lifted. You didn't know it, but you were my quiet place. He exhaled, like setting down a weight he'd carried too long. The host, visibly moved, was speechless. Will leaned back slightly, his voice carrying the tremble of release. I never sent it because I thought I'd get another chance. A long silence then. But something happened recently, something small, but it woke me up. The host, his voice hushed, asked, what was it? Will glanced sideways. We saw each other again briefly at a charity event. She looked the same, maybe even brighter. We hugged and it was warm, real. Then it was over. He took a slow breath. Later that day I got a call, a health scare. Nothing serious, just a routine check showing a slight irregularity. Manageable, but enough to make me stop and think, this body won't last forever. The audience listened, rapt. I went home and rewatched an old interview of hers, Will continued. I don't know why, just looking for something. And in it she said, Will, I always thought he was the one that got away. The host leaned in sharply. She said that? Will nodded, visibly moved. She did. A pause then, almost to himself. and I never replied until now. The air felt suspended, like time itself had paused. Will sat quietly, lighter but older. Not in years, but in the weight of memory. The host, voice soft, asked, "You said something made you realize you're running out of time. Can you tell us more?" Will nodded slowly. "It started with a conversation. About 6 months ago, I was at a charity gala. Jada was there. I didn't expect it, and she didn't either. We were seated 2 tables apart." He gave a faint smile. It had been years, but she looked at me like no time had passed. "That's who she is. She makes you feel like you're always welcome." He paused, remembering. We talked, light stuff, the food, the vibe, typical LA small talk. But underneath it, there was this silence, the kind that holds a question. A what if? He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, fingers laced. It was good to see her. But when we hugged goodbye, something in me felt unfinished. Not unsaid, but unfinished. The room was quiet. That night, he continued, I got that call from my doctor. Routine blood work, nothing major, but a small issue with my heart rhythm. Easily managed. But standing there in my kitchen, hearing those words, I realized this body's not forever. He looked at the host, eyes clear. It wasn't fear, it was clarity. I'd spent decades waiting to heal, waiting for the right moment, waiting to feel worthy. Then I realized there's no such thing as ready. There's just now. The audience didn't stir. His words landed raw, unfiltered. So I went looking for pieces of the past, Will said. Old interviews, photos, anything to remember how it started, how we looked at each other before the world knew our names. A quiet, sad laugh. I found this clip, a press junket from Bad Boys. We were side by side, joking, and she looks at me, just for a second, a look I'd forgotten. I paused the video and said out loud to no one, "Why didn't I say something then?" He shook his head. "You think you have time. Another project, another dinner, another moment. But then you hear your heartbeat skip, and you wonder if the next one's coming. Suddenly, all the things you didn't say echo louder than anything you did." The host, visibly affected, leaned forward. What happened next? Will exhaled slowly. I sat in the dark, tried to write a new letter, something to send her. But the words felt forced, too late. That's when I knew this wasn't about rewriting the past. It was about telling the truth now, even if it changes nothing. He looked at the audience. There's something sacred about saying it even if no one answers. The host nodded. What about that interview, where she said you were the one that got away? How did that feel? Will smiled, eyes distant. Bittersweet, beautiful, painful, all of it. A beat. She said it with this little smile, like she didn't even know how much it meant. That's Jada. She gives without measuring what it costs her. He sat back. I thought I was protecting her by staying silent. But maybe I was just protecting myself from the fear that I wasn't enough. The host exhaled. So now you're here. You've read the letter, told the story. What's next? Will didn't answer right away. Then he looked into the camera, calm, direct. There's one more thing I haven't said. The host blinked, surprised. Will nodded. This isn't about a grand gesture or a second chance or closure, it's about truth. The audience held their breath. Will leaned forward slightly. So if she's watching, he took a breath. There's something I need to say, not for the past, but for now. The screen lingered, the lights warm, like dawn through a window. Will sat not as a star, but as a man who'd let something go. If she's watching, he began, voice steady. I spent years thinking I had to be whole to love, that I had to fix everything inside me first. But that's not how love works. Real love doesn't need perfection. It just needs you to show up. He paused, each word deliberate. I thought the love I felt had to stay buried, like a secret too fragile for daylight. But the longer you keep love silent, the more it becomes something else, distance, memory, silence. The host's eyes were damp but focused. Will leaned forward. Jada, I don't want anything from you. No response, no answer, no next step. I just want you to know I loved you, not in a way that asks for more, but in a way that always has. The audience stirred, many blinking back tears. I didn't love you like the movies, he continued. No big speeches, no running through airports. I loved you in the quiet, in the way you held your coffee with both hands, the way you saw people when you thought no one noticed. He paused as if seeing her again. I loved you in that trailer, sitting in silence. When the world finally stopped spinning, that was the closest I ever felt to home. A quiet sob came from the audience, not loud, just human, someone who understood. Will continued, eyes on the camera. Maybe love doesn't always get to be lived out. Maybe some love is meant to be carried, not acted on, but honored. He tilted his head. I've carried you in small, quiet ways, through grief, through joy, through moments when I forgot who I was but never forgot you. The host's hand covered his mouth, overcome. Will took a breath, looking beyond the camera. I forgive myself for not being ready, for not being brave. And I thank you for never needing me to be more than I was. The air felt lighter, like a weight had lifted. The host, voice reverent, asked, Why now? Why here with all of us? Will's eyes were clear. Because silence doesn't protect you, it separates you. I spent my life trying not to need, not to reach, not to hurt. But in doing that, I missed the chance to love out loud. He turned to the audience. If there's someone you love, really love, don't wait. Not for the perfect moment, not for the right words, tell them, even if your voice shakes, even if it's too late for anything to come of it. Love isn't about what you get back, it's about what you give freely. He made eye contact with the crowd, strangers who felt like more now. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is tell someone they mattered. The host exhaled, a breath held too long. You carried it for 25 years. Will nodded. I did. Then softer. And now maybe I don't have to anymore. The host moved, asked, What do you feel right now? Will thought for a moment. Grateful, he said, a real quiet smile breaking through. Because love, even unspoken, even unanswered, still changes you. The host let the words linger. And if she's watching? Will looked at the camera. I hope she knows she was never alone in what she felt. He straightened, breathing deeply. So if she's watching, he paused, offering the moment to fate. There's something I need to say, not for the past, but for now. The lights warmed, the studio hushed. Will sat, no longer just a star, but a man who'd released something and still stood whole. Jada, he said, her name carrying reverence, not tension. I don't regret the silence anymore. It taught me how deeply I could feel, how long I could carry something without it breaking me, how love, even hidden, can shape you. The audience sat still, tears in many eyes, not sad, but the kind that come when something finally makes sense. I didn't say this to change anything, Will continued. I said it because it's real and real things deserve to be spoken. He inhaled gently, like closing a book written across decades. You don't owe me anything, not your time, not your memory, not your forgiveness. A small smile. But if you ever wondered if I saw you, the answer is yes. I saw everything and I loved it all. He turned to the audience. And to everyone here, anyone listening. If there's someone you loved quietly, someone who never knew, I hope you tell them. But if you can't, honor it anyway. Love doesn't vanish because it wasn't returned. It doesn't lose meaning because it stayed unspoken. The host, voice thick, asked, Do you regret it? Will thought, then shook his head. Not for loving her in silence, but for waiting too long to call it love. The room held its breath, no applause. No music, just the quiet weight of truth set free. Slowly, one by one, the audience stood. Not like a curtain call, but like a vigil, a ceremony for something sacred. Will didn't wave or bow. He sat present, whole in a way he hadn't been before. His eyes glistened, but he didn't cry. He smiled gently. You don't have to marry someone to love them for a lifetime.